Welcome to Trauma and Transcendence, where healing meets awakening. I'm Amanda M. Dodd, your guide on this transformative journey. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Let's transcend together. Hello, hello, soulful seekers. Welcome back to Trauma and Transcendence. And you already know I've got another guest for you today. Today I have the lovely Carolyn Ching. I can't wait for you to meet her. There are so many good things to talk about. Primarily today, Carolyn has a focus in trauma, anxiety, and then working in general hypnosis as well. So if you have any challenges with that, you've got some questions you'd like to ask, make sure you comment them below the episode. And I will make sure that we get Carolyn back to either answer or get a response for you. But welcome, Carolyn. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me here on Trauma and Transcendence.
Hi, lovely to see you again.
I know. It feels longer than maybe it has been because we just saw each other at HypnoThoughts. But before
We
that, I
did.
think it had been a solid couple of years.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So it was lovely to catch up with everyone again in Vegas at HypnoThoughts.
And you were on a pretty fantastic travel from what I recall. You were going from place to place, seeing the world. How was that?
I
Did that end with Vegas?
No, it didn't. So I did the bucket list Alaska cruise trip first, and then went to Vegas for the conference, and also caught up with friends there too. And then after that, I went to Hawaii, where I have friends and clients, and then back here to the Sunshine Coast, Australia.
Quite the tour. What was your favorite part?
I absolutely loved Alaska. The glaciers were incredible. The scenery was phenomenal, was really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that. That some people just really find it exquisite. I just don't think I'm one of those. I don't know if I can break past the cold. I don't know, maybe it's growing up Canadian and having so much exposure to winter that it's like, no, I don't need to see
Yeah.
this anywhere else in the world. But it sounded amazing and like you had a wonderful time.
I
For
did,
my
yeah.
audience, yeah. For my audience, they are primarily people who are tuning in because they're curious about what we have to talk about. So let's give them an introduction to who you are and how you help people.
Okay, so I decided apparently when I was 7 that I was going to be a hypnotherapist. I didn't actually activate that for a while. I started out my career as a registered nurse, and then I developed an allergy to latex gloves. And so that was my kick from the universe to go and do the things that I'd been thinking of doing, which was counseling, hypnotherapy. And so when I did my first hypnotherapy training, my mother said to me, you told me when you were 7 that you were going to be a hypnotherapist. And how many kids in the UK in the 60s even knew what that was? So I did hypnotherapy training, counseling training, NLP, timeline therapies, some different types of energy healings. And then I've really settled into the hypnotherapy, the timeline therapy, and the NLP. They're the three main things that I use.
So, the majority of my audience are not hypnotists, although they see enough of them. How would you explain timeline therapy or NLP to someone who's more of a layperson and doesn't know maybe the nuances of everything?
So with timeline therapy, the unconscious mind stores time. It stores all of our memories, and that's in a linear fashion. And it has every memory from the day that we were born or before that, depending on our beliefs. And so with timeline therapy, we actually use a process where we're in a light trance and we can go back and we can look at different things in this lifetime or our past lifetime. Often we're using timeline therapy to release unresolved negative emotions, things like anger, sadness, fear, guilt. Most of us have a backlog of those purely because we're human. you know.
Yeah.
And so we will go back and we will look at the root cause of the emotion. So if you take anger as an example, if we want to release anger, then we'll look for the root cause, which is often when we're children, often when we're very young. Often those events are very trivial, but because we're children, everything is kind of in our face at that point in our life, and we don't have the ability to resolve issues in the way that we do when we're adults. And so the unconscious mind stores that very first time that we were angry. It could be when we were a year and somebody took a toy away from us and we were angry, couldn't resolve it. So the unconscious mind stores that memory and it starts a chain. And then every single event where we have unresolved anger after that links like a string of pearls. And with timeline therapy, what we're doing is we're going back to the root cause, we're letting it go, and everything else dissolves, which means that if we've had more major traumas, often we don't even need to go to those events. Once we clear all the negative emotions, those things become, really much easier to look at or to remember because we don't have the emotional content.
Yeah. I can see why that would be helpful, and actually helpful in the sense of moving forward for the next triggering event not being so big, because there isn't
Yes.
like a full cup waiting to spill over that's been, traveling through their entire lives. I do not practice timeline therapy. I've heard about it, but it's not something that I've learned. I do explore regression. And so for a moment there, I thought I heard you say that before birth, they can go back and explore. And I'm thinking, oh, that must be similar to life between lives.
We use a different process and we maybe don't spend as long looking at that time.
Mm-hmm.
What we do with timeline therapy is if the unconscious mind says, the root cause of this happens to be before birth, then we have the question of, well, is it in the womb or before that? And then if they
Mm-hmm.
say before that, then we have the question of, is it passed down through the generations or is it past life? And so they may say past life. And then we look at how many lifetimes ago it was, go to that event, and really, just as an observer, get whatever learnings we can get from that event. So we don't typically spend as long as if we're actually doing just a past life regression. I do those too, but for usually different issues. So this is briefer. We're really just getting the learnings and then letting them go.
Yeah. I like the linear sense of it. That's kind of interesting. I like the contrast and how that's different from what I do.
Yes. Yeah.
So when someone comes to see you about anxiety, because quite literally you wrote the book, right? You've got it
Yep.
there behind you. Do
I
you want to
do.
show it real quick?
And it literally is called Anxiety the Book.
Yeah, literally wrote the book on anxiety. And so when someone comes to see you for anxiety, what kind of challenges or things are they trying to work through?
So, for everybody who has anxiety, there's usually a number of things under the surface that led to that anxiety, and that can be different for everyone. So, I usually start with a set of questions, which are also in the book. So, it's typically, are you a perfectionist? A lot of people who have anxiety are perfectionists. Do you have high expectations of yourself and others, or just yourself? So, that's the second question. Are you the strong one, the one that other people come to for advice or to dump their issues on? Typically, a lot of people who experience anxiety are the ones that others always come to for advice. They're always the ones that other people in the family or the community see as being the strong one.
And
Do
so
you
I
have
wonder
difficult...
how many
Go
times
ahead.
is their anxiety not actually theirs?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It's just what they've been carrying around from whatever got dropped off most recently.
yeah. And then, do you have difficulty saying no? So that's another very common factor that will lead into anxiety, is somebody who, people ask for help with things or to come and do things or at work, and they literally say yes to everything, putting themselves at the bottom of the basket. So they never have time to actually rest, relax, or do the things that they want or need to do. And in that people pleasing, we also start developing anxiety at some point. And then there's other factors, like if we've had loved ones that have passed away and we haven't had the opportunity to say goodbye. So people who've passed away suddenly with a heart attack or an accident, that kind of thing. Also people who've had a event where they've been not in control. So something like an earthquake or a flood or a fire. Or, of course, most of us, COVID was difficult for a lot of people. Some people thrived during that time. Other people, because they weren't in control of their environment, it's one of the main factors that's led to anxiety. And so people who have, 3 or more of those things that they tick and say yes to, at some point in their life, they're likely to get anxiety.
Yeah.
And so depending on the responses to the questions is what we need to work on. So it's all tailored specifically to the answers to those questions. Often it's things like setting boundaries, being able to learn to say no.
That makes a lot of sense. Although I think when it comes to anxiety, it's rarely, when it comes to mind and when I think about when I've had anxiety in the past, I had not connected the dots between saying no and having boundaries and people pleasing. I was aware of people dumping energy. That one I knew. But I think the latter points that you've made, I don't think those are common knowledge at all. I don't think
Yeah.
people connect those dots. Yeah.
No, no. And so, there's a little bit, as I say in the book, there's a bit of a recipe for how we get anxiety. And then there's also a recipe for how we can overcome it.
Oh, I love that. You've got like little recipes on each end. That's awesome. Would you care to share what someone who's having, say, generalized anxiety might begin to do to kind of suss out at what point do they need intervention? Like, can they resolve the anxiety themselves, or at what point do they need to know, oh, I should be calling Carolyn at this point to have a Zoom?
Yeah. So if you find that it's affecting your daily life, you're constantly in that hyper alert fight flight phase where little things start to set you off. You become angry or teary for no apparent reason, or you're hearing a noise in the night and you really can't get back to sleep. It sets the heart racing. If we're experiencing things like palpitations, our heart racing on a regular basis, if we have that knot in our stomach, if we're going to work and we start developing that knot in the stomach, and that's just going to increase unless we address it. So any of those symptoms that really start affecting our daily life, or if we don't go somewhere because we're worried about what might happen or what could go wrong, they're the things that, we really need to start looking at this before it gets worse.
Yeah. And in my experience, it often does. It does get
Yeah.
worse. It starts off really small and then it gets louder and louder and louder until you make a change and
Yes.
rectify it. That's been my experience, at least. So I think
Yes.
my anxiety in the past was more situational, less generalized. It was more relational and situational, is where I think I
Yes.
probably experienced it most.
Yeah.
So if someone is identifying that for themselves and they're maybe just on the beginning of that journey with anxiety and it's just beginning, but they know it's going to increase and get louder, what are a couple of recipe steps you'd recommend for them to begin to explore?
One of the main ones that I start with people is looking at your what if thoughts. Wherever there's anxiety, there's always what if thoughts. What if this goes wrong? What if that doesn't work? What if I get sick? What if they don't like me? What if, so we start what ifing. And our unconscious mind can't tell the difference between what we're thinking and what's actually happening. And so every time we do a what if I get sick? What if they don't like me at work? What if this happens? Your unconscious mind thinks that's actually happening. And so it secretes the stress chemicals into our system. And, those what if thoughts, we don't generally do one. It's a little bit like the ones that we're aware of are the tip of the iceberg. Under the surface, there's a whole lot more that we're not even aware we're doing. So one of the first things is to look at those what if thoughts. And typically it's, really focusing on that. If you notice yourself doing a what if, tell yourself stop. And if you're somewhere on your own, say it out loud for the first couple of weeks. Stop. Do I have proof? So if you're sitting there, today and you're thinking, what if I can't pay my rent at the end of the month? Stop. Do I have proof I can't pay my rent at the end of the month? Well, it's only the beginning of the month right now, so there's a lot of things that could happen between now and the end of the month. So there is no proof. What if I can pay my rent on time? So we simply turn it around to something that's positive. What if I'm fine? What if everything works out okay? What if the presentation goes well? What if they love me? What if I can pay my rent? And your conscious mind isn't, yeah. And the conscious mind isn't going to believe it. It's going to be like, yeah, right. But the unconscious mind needs to hear it. So we need to start working with those positive what ifs. So
and I think
that's
when people begin to do that, they can actually feel it immediately too. Just the change of turning it around. I think they can feel like, oh, my chest is loosening. I can have a little more breathing room, and the immediate urgency kind of diminishes.
Yes, yeah. And then, breathing is another one that, people are very familiar with that really helps with anxiety. But before it gets to the anxiety stage, we all need to be aware of breathing from the gut, or as the Hawaiians call it, the na'au. So this is where our life force energy comes from. And so breathing deeply and from the gut and slowing the breath down, because if you're breathing rapidly and shallowly, which most of us do a lot of the time, we're actually kicking the body into the fight-flight mode. And so there may not even be anything going around it, but it's purely our breath that's stimulating that fight-flight mode and then making us more susceptible to being anxious for other reasons.
That was something I noticed during the pandemic when I actually began to wear a mask. I didn't have anxiety, and then when I put the mask on, I realized, oh, I can't breathe. I can't breathe properly, so I'm feeling anxious because of the breath. And then how many people began to mouth breathe during the pandemic, which is even worse for so many other reasons.
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So, even if you don't have anxiety, but every day just practicing a few really deep breaths and slowing the breath down. And what I like to do with my clients is I call it 5 by 5. So some people call it box breathing, but it's inhaling to a count of 5, holding for a count of 5, and exhaling to a count of 5. And doing that from really deep in the belly.
Yeah. Can make a big difference. One of the things I like to do when I'm in the soul cave and I have a group is often I will do a breathing activity first, and it's just to show them the difference it can create in the mind, because we really are physiological beings first. And I think a lot of us, when we come to spirituality, we want to distance from that. We want to disassociate from the physical. And it's like, no, you really do have to operate this machinery. And the breath really is that remote control to so many things, not just our nervous system, but in the work that I do to people's psychic abilities. If you're not breathing right, your body's not going to prioritize you visiting a loved one in heaven or any of those things. It's just trying to survive first.
Yeah, so breathing is really important. And I lived in Hawaii for many years and I still spend quite a lot of time there. I have clients there still. And back in the 1800s when Captain Cook first arrived. He arrived on the big island in Kealakekua Bay, which is close to where I lived. And so the Hawaiians thought he was a ghost because he was white and he appeared to not be breathing. But that was because he was breathing shallowly, like many Westerners do. And so, they thought he was a ghost. Yeah.
I never heard that. I love that. That's funny. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I can only imagine
Yeah.
what that was like for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then actually also, if you go to Hawaii ever, you may hear a term haole or haole, which means literally without breath. And so that's what they call the white people. That's kind of the nickname for the white people because we're without breath. Because, yes, I had no intention of writing a second book, but a couple of weeks ago I woke up and it was like, okay, get a pad, get a pen, start writing. And so the new book is called It's Time to Be Me. I already have the cover design done for it. So it's a book really about people really being able to be themselves, regardless of what other people think of them, regardless of what they think other people are thinking of them, because that's often a big thing. We think other people are thinking things and actually they're not.
Yeah.
So it's really about how to be your authentic self. And also looking at, we have people who have a lot of cosmetic surgery to feel good about themselves or because they think they should look a certain way or should be a certain way. And actually that's not their authentic self. And having worked, years ago with quite a lot of really beautiful young girls who had a lot of cosmetic surgery done, they have one thing done and then they still don't feel good about themselves. They have another thing done and they still don't feel good about themselves. It's like getting a new car. It works okay for, a couple of weeks. We feel good about this new car while it still has the new smell about it. And then a month later, it's kind of, well, it's just usual, And so we start looking for the next thing. And so it's really about looking at what things do we need to put in place to be okay with who we are.
Yeah. It almost sounds like it becomes a bit of an external game of whack-a-mole where they're trying to fix everything on the outside. But the inside's not the thing that's changing. That's where the discomfort is.
Yeah. So
I think that was my 20s. Man, I'm glad that's over.
Yep. And I think, that period of our lives is all about finding out who we are and what we want and being able to do things that maybe everybody else that we know isn't doing and being okay with that, really starting to find out who we are. But there's a lot of people still in their 50s and 60s and sometimes even in their 70s who still haven't worked out how to be okay being who they are. They still do things because they think they need to be a certain way or need to behave a certain way. So, so we'll see how that pans out in the book.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how that pans out. That'll be amazing. I saw a Facebook meme the other day. It was a little bit of a video, and it was talking about the highest, most pure vibration in the world, that there was a team of people who were measuring the most appealing vibration there was. And most people think it's love. It's actually authenticity.
Wow. That's really interesting.
I'll have to find it for you.
Yeah.
I'll leave myself a note.
Yes.
So that I can send that to you. But I was actually surprised by that as well. But then again, it's like, you know what? Oh, that makes a world of sense, because when I'm completely okay with me, everyone around me can feel that. And then this is way too personal to be sharing on this podcast. I've been married for 15 years. And my spouse and I joke because we seem to love each other more every day, and every day we have never seems to be enough. It's any free moment we have, we're wanting to be together. And so I was a little pressed for time, and so I was having dinner. He'd made dinner and we were having it in the bathtub, and we're sitting there eating in the bathtub, taking a bath and eating baked potatoes with sour cream. And he took a big old bite and he had sour cream from his nose. It was like, it was dripping down. And then I'm just laughing, thinking it's the funniest thing. And he's like, I'm so glad you just love me sour cream and all and everything that happens. And it's like, yeah. But that's that authenticity. I mean, it's not going to get more authentic than that.
No, and perfect place if you've got sour cream dripping down you to be in the bath.
If anybody had any illusions of me being perfect, no, this is what real life is like over here.
Yep.
But in that moment, we were both pretty authentic, and I think that's why the love grows as much as it has, even after 15 years, where any single minute we can have together, we're happy to spend it in whatever awkward way, just to have that time, because that level of authenticity doesn't happen anywhere else.
No, and that's really special. To just be able to be yourself 100% with somebody else. And that's really what we're all striving for.
Yeah. And the more we can do it, the more the whole world opens up to us. Yeah. Because I know now that someone's going to hear this, and even though it was a weird, cringy thing for me to share, someone's going to totally relate to that and be like, thank you so much for saying that. Just wait. Give it a week or two. It'll happen.
Yep.
So no, I love that you're writing on authenticity, because it really is so immensely powerful for that reason.
Yes. Yeah. So have an outline for the book, and we'll see how it all comes together.
Yeah.
Typically, we don't breathe like the Hawaiians do. They breathe from the na'au, or the belly. Yeah.
It's beautiful. So beginning to look at the thoughts and working with the breath. Do you have any favorite stories of anxiety clients that you've worked with? Maybe a case where they really overcame something powerful?
And I've had quite a few over the years. I've been doing this for over 20 years. But one of the ones was a client here in Australia, actually, and she was in a workplace where she was looking at getting promotion. And so she was literally saying yes to everything. She was ending up spending evenings at work, weekends at work, yes to every task, everything that was given to her, because she kind of thought she couldn't say no. If she said no, she wasn't going to get this promotion that she really, really wanted. And so she started developing anxiety because she had no time for anything else. She had a few other factors going on. And so I said to her a few of these things. We were looking at the what if, her what ifs were about what if she didn't get the promotion, what if she couldn't move up the company in the way that she wanted, what if she lost her job, because those things were happening at the time too. Lots of what ifs. And then for her, it was learning that boundary of saying no. And so when I first broached that with her, she was kind of like, she did everything else, but wasn't game to put that in place at work. And so things improved on some levels, but really not to the level that they could have improved. And the crunch came when somebody actually was promoted, or somebody from outside the company was brought in for this position that she wanted. I think actually it was somebody who'd been there about 6 months and that got this promotion. She'd been there for years. And so that really, sent her on a stress spiral. And so after that, she started really learning how to say no. And what she noticed was, after you've done it the first few times, people start to respect you. Because rather than just thinking, Gemma will do this, Gemma will fix that, Gemma will stay, they actually have to think about you. I wonder if she could do this. I wonder if she could stay late tonight. And so once she implemented that, she found the whole dynamic at work shifted. And she had been looking at leaving the company. Once this other person got the promotion, she'd been looking at leaving the company. But once she started saying no and recognized that the whole dynamic shifted, She ended up staying and getting a promotion. So that was a fun one.
I've
And then I
heard
had
that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's really typical. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've heard that. The more that people pleasers are too pleasing and too accommodating and too kind, that they generally are disregarded as being respected, and having that inner vision of themselves in a way that really carries over to other places. And so often the people pleasers are the ones who will get taken advantage of and turned down for things.
Yes.
It was great that
Yeah.
she was able to turn that around and
Yeah.
to start experiencing life from, oh, when I do treat myself better, not only do I feel better, but then I get the things I want. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because that's, over the 20 years that I've worked with people with anxiety, saying no is one of the big things for so many people. It's a two-letter word, but it's the one that so many people have a problem saying. Yeah.
In your long experience, why do you feel that is?
I think typically we're taught, and particularly women, are taught to be kind to other people, to do things for other people. It's generational as well. The older generations were taught to put other people before themselves. And so many of the older generation people have this thing about, well, if I say no, that I'm being selfish. So the being selfish is something that a lot of people worry about, but what they don't realize is that being selfish is one end of the scale. The people pleasing and disregarding yourself is the other end of the scale. And what we're aiming to do is bring them into the middle.
Yeah. Just to find more balance and middle ground.
Yeah.
One thing I like to tell my clients is not only is it helpful for you to say no for, their own reasons, but also to whoever is going and relying on them. They're enabling that person to not learn a skill, to not gain a strength, to not take a chance, and to be able to problem solve things themselves. And it's like, so not only are you not happy, not saying no, but then you're also keeping this other person stuck and dependent and reliant. And is that what you want for them? And then usually they have this moment of, oh, no, I want them to go out into the world and to build the skill and to be empowered and to feel better. And it's like, see, it's not just for you.
Yeah. 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 And
Yeah.
that's often important, to tell them. That's something that I always talk about too.
Yeah. And so you mentioned you're already working on another book. Do you want to tell us a bit about that? Have you ever heard of the book by Anita Morjani, Dying to Be Me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
It
that's a
kind
book
of
I
gives
read
me,
many years ago.
yeah. It kind of gives me similar vibes to where you're possibly building.
Yeah.
Because her too, and she was dying because she wasn't authentic. She wasn't being honest with
Yeah.
herself or her loved ones. And that was, spiritual 2x4, right?
Yeah.
We don't listen to the quiet message. It gets really, really loud. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be amazing. Do you have a timeline, or are you kind of keeping that close to home for now?
I'm aiming to have it done by Christmas.
Cool.
So usually when something like that starts, because as I said, I haven't had any intention of writing another book. So generally it just starts flowing, and I'll sit and there'll just be a whole lot that will start flowing. So I'm thinking before Christmas, and hopefully that timeline will come to fruition.
Going with the flow.
Yep.
I did anything I could not to write a book, so that's why there's a podcast. It was any way out that I could bargain. So I love that for you. I love that you're over there and you're letting the books write themselves and flow through you, because it's
Yeah.
not going to happen here. Oh, goodness. Did you speak at Hypnothoughts Live?
I didn't this year. I've spoken there twice, but not this year because it was kind of a last minute thing that I would be coming. I had a hip replacement at the end of February, and so I didn't even know if I could travel. So, funny story, for the last 20 years, I've wanted to do Esther Hicks' Abraham Alaska cruise. I don't know if you're familiar with Esther Hicks. You probably are.
I am. I'm on the fence. There's some things I resonate with and some things I really don't. So
Yeah,
the people
yeah,
who do, I'm happy for them. The people that don't, it's fine. I have no real.
yeah, yeah.
But I didn't know she did a cruise. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, they do lots of cruises. And so I'd had this one, in my mind for a good number of years. She's been running the Alaska cruise for 20 years. So after my hip replacement in the recovery, I'm looking at, maybe I can go and do this next year in 2025. 2025 is the first time in 20 years they're not running the Alaska cruise. So they're doing Canada, New England instead. And so I'm like, oh, maybe I'll have to look at this year. And so I looked and the dates were July. And I thought, okay, just going to have to make sure I'm fit and able to do all this walking by July then. So I just went online and booked it, and that was how it happened.
And almost all the better because it seems like it was perfect timing for you to get exactly what you needed to be in fighting shape again.
Yeah. And then that was perfect. The timing for that was perfect to just the end of that to go to Vegas for HypnoThoughts. So I thought, great. I had no intention of going this year again because, I thought I'll be recovering for a while. So I hadn't applied to be a speaker, but then, so it was actually nice to go just as a participant and not to have to think about speaking and just to go and enjoy all the different things that were on offer.
I think it's definitely a different vibe when you're presenting somewhere because even if my talk isn't until like the last day, I find that I'm in like work mindset and it's really hard to shift out of it and to just enjoy being an attendee after that. Like it's hard
Yes.
to bounce back and forth. And so I'm always happy when I'm presenting somewhere and if it's like quickest, I'm like, oh great, I'm gonna get it done and then I'll just enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to see somebody about that.
I think lots of us are like that though. I'd rather speak on the first day than the last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be able to shift into, oh, let me take this in and actually enjoy and see. And it's not that we don't know the topics that other people are presenting on. More often than not, we do. But it's like, oh, what unique genius kind of route have they mapped out? And let's, hear that fun story.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it really good.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we were talking, so we first met actually at Michigan Hypnosis Conference in the first annual conference.
We did, the one where Dan tried to kill me.
I don't know that story. Oh no.
Well, we laugh
What
about
did
it.
we do?
So I have a latex allergy, and no
right.
conference I have been to in the US has ever had balloons. So I now don't think to mention it because it's never an issue. And so, I came from Hawaii. Dan had a first night Hawaii party, which was also pretty funny. And I walked into the room and he has a whole load of balloons because he's thinking of doing balloon games. So I'm like, okay, I can't stay here. So I went to find him and I said, I told him the issue and said, I'm quite happy to go back to my room. And there was transport that was running us between the lodge and where the event was, So poor guy had to run around getting people to remove all the balloons. So he always joked that Dan tried to kill me at the first Michigan conference.
I absolutely would have paid to have seen his face because I know that he's like so caring and so genuine. He's a Cancer sun sign like me. So I know exactly how that goes. His face was probably just, I can imagine how crestfallen he was and how quickly he moved. Oh, bless him.
The one thing I didn't think of, because
Oh,
he'd put so much care and detail and
yeah,
attention to every facet of that conference, and he was probably going, the one thing I
he
didn't think
does.
of.
He really does.
Yeah,
He's really so good about that, and that's why I keep going back year after year. This will be my third year going to Michigan, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's coming up. I can't believe it's already, just about 18 days out.
yeah,
It's quick for me. I get to drive. It'll be under 4 hours, so that's awesome.
yeah, yeah. So I
No
will be there
no
in
long flights.
2025, and it's a bit more
Yeah,
than a 4-hour drive for me to get there.
yeah. Well, you are welcome to come and crash in Ohio.
Thank you.
I've got a I've got a guest room if you fly in a few days early and you can handle crazy pets because I have many. Then you are welcome to stay and unwind because when you fly over, that's got to be a whole adventure. Most of your flights are actually quite long.
Yes, yeah. So I tend to go through Hawaii if I can and either stay there or use that as my first port of call before going on to somewhere else. So this time when I went to Alaska, it was, I live on the Sunshine Coast, so it was getting from the Sunshine Coast to Brisbane. First flight is Brisbane to Sydney, then a flight from Sydney to Honolulu, then it was Honolulu to Vegas, a very quick overnight in Vegas, and then to Vancouver. So door to door was 40 hours for that.
Oh, goodness. And you are
Yeah.
still recovering, so that's a lot. Yeah.
So,
Ooh, were there
so
any techniques that got you through that? Just to manage your daily state as you were making that 40-hour trek and recovery as well.
literally just focusing on each leg and also, not doing any what ifs. And then I tend to just get straight into the time zone. So, if I land in Hawaii, okay, I'm on Hawaiian time straight
Yeah.
away. And then it's to Vegas, and then I'm on Vegas time. And it's just, taking care of yourself, doing some meditation on the plane. I usually sit and do some self-hypnosis or some meditation for a while. I'm not a great sleeper on planes if I'm in the upright position, so I find the hypnosis or the meditation is good. Yeah. And hydration.
Yeah. I'm finding as I get older, red eye flights are getting harder and harder. And I
Yeah.
often don't sleep. So if I do, it's not a good sleep. So
Yeah.
it's not worth
No.
not worth it. Yeah. So I agree. I've noticed even just going to Vegas this year was harder and I'm like, oh, this kind of takes a toll. Even though it's
Yeah.
not like a huge trip, it still took a decent toll just going from Eastern Standard Time down to whatever they are over there
Yeah.
in Arizona where they never change time zone ever. What a gift. I would enjoy that. Never changing
Yeah.
time zone.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, we don't
But
change
you
time
have
zone here
also
either.
wow. See, I've never been to
Yeah.
Australia. I would love to.
Yeah,
Love
so
to.
in
There's
Queensland
hypnosis
we
conferences
don't.
over there too.
There
Yeah.
are,
Have you
yeah.
ever been?
I have been to a few, many years ago in Australia. At the moment, even though I'm living here, I'm currently still doing more US ones than Australian ones.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
preference or
Yeah, and I think because I've made friends at all the US conferences, it's just so nice to catch up with people again. And
nothing says peer pressure to go to a conference like friendship. I'm learning very quickly. And the moment you say, "Oh, I don't think I'm going to go this year," and the emails start coming, and you're like, "Oh man, I feel bad."
Yeah.
Oh goodness. So you also teach. What does that look like?
So I teach timeline therapy. I used to teach hypnosis and NLP, but I haven't done that for a number of years. But timeline therapy, I think I'm one of the only people who teaches that as a standalone course.
Yeah.
And then that's a 3-day course, and we're just focused on how it works, where to use it, a lot of practical experience in, working with somebody else during the course so that you really are familiar with all the techniques. And then at the end of the 3 days, you're ready to go and use it in your practice.
Yeah. Are you familiar with, I'm trying to think of his last name now. Luke. I don't know if you know him or not. And I'm blanking on his last name. I had him on the podcast a little bit ago, but interesting guy, from England, lives in Canada now, but also trained with Tad James, I believe, in timeline therapy, but also, oh goodness, we talked about not Ho'oponopono per se, but he was talking about the other big Hawaiian spirituality, working with kahunas. I can't remember what it was called.
Huna.
Are you familiar?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
know him? Have you met him?
I haven't met him, no.
I'll connect you. You two might enjoy each other because you've got a lot in
Yeah.
common. He's a very fun personality.
Yeah.
Very, very fun. But I think you've got a
Yeah.
lot in common and you'd enjoy the heck out of each other.
Yeah.
In any case, I wanted to ask, did you have a chance to work with Tad James?
I did my training with him in timeline therapy 22 years ago. Yeah, and then I used to assist on a lot of their Secret of Creating Your Future weekends when they came here to Australia when I was living here. I did a few Huna courses with them in Hawaii.
That's right.
So, yeah, and then during COVID, I decided I'd redo all of my timeline therapy trainers training just for something fun to do, basically, and just to make sure I was still up to date with all the most recent changes. So I redid the whole training during COVID, which was fun. Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
What a gift to work with the man himself. I've heard so many wonderful stories from different practitioners all over.
Yeah.
That had to have been quite the experience.
It was. Yeah, he was an amazing trainer. Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you teach it, is it in person? Is it virtual? Is it ever hybrid? Or how does it work?
So normally it's always been in person, but now that I'm back in Australia, that's a little bit more difficult because I have some people from the US wanting to do it in different places. And so I'm aiming at getting that course online, hopefully by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. So I just have to transcend my tech trauma to get it online. I see all my clients virtually, because I have clients from the UK, from the US, from Hawaii, from Europe. But just putting a course out there online, I need to transcend that trauma.
Well, I may have a solution for you. I'll remind myself. I just wrote it down so that I can bring it up later. I actually just signed up for a program with Jason Lynette, and he's going to be guiding us through several weeks. It's an 8-week class where we begin to build a course, and we use ClickFunnels, which is a really easy software. So you might actually be interested in that. That might be divine timing right there.
It could be.
I'll send you the info after, in case you need a little bit of help. And if trauma comes up, I've got you because I'm enrolled. I'll be right there. Thankfully, you've made it through the podcast. We had some challenges, but you survived. You got here. That was the important thing.
Yes, yes.
And so, are there other things that you enjoy teaching or bringing out into the world through your session work? I heard you say a little bit of breath work.
Yes, I do a little bit of breath, but mainly it's really about empowering people to be able to be their authentic self. So most of my timeline therapy work that I do with people is all about that. The more things that we clear from the past, the more able we are to be our authentic self. And then, of course, every choice, every decision we make for the future is different. The more baggage we've cleared, it really changes what our choices are for the future. So.
Yeah, and then of course there's, all of the stories that goes with the baggage of the people we think we have to be, or like the judgments that we hold.
Yeah, yeah.
Stuff's
And for
heavy.
some people, one of the scariest things is, who am I without the baggage?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people don't even know what that could look like. And so that's the first
Yeah.
thing is, what is it that they really want? Some people don't know what they want. And then sometimes once you've cleared some baggage, then they can start to become clear on what it is they want. I have a lovely client in Hawaii who was doing a job that she hated and getting into another job that she also wasn't really that fussed about doing, but, it was great, it was going to pay the bills. And a couple of sessions, and, for some people it's 2 sessions, for some people it's a few more. After 2 sessions, she quit the job and she actually joined a local band, and she'd wanted to be a musician since she was tiny, never had the courage to do it, had a lot of people around her that, that's not a real job.
Mm-hmm.
But she quit the band, she quit the work. She knew she had enough savings to live off for about 6 months, so decided that she was going to get into this band. And she said, her whole world is different because now she's in alignment with who she truly is, and everything is easier.
Yeah.
So it's just
There is really
amazing.
something to be said about that. When we're not in authenticity, the band of resistance that we're trying to push through is something else.
Yeah, yeah. And when you clear a lot of those things, it's true, everything just opens up and starts to become easier. And so that's one of the things that I really love with the work that I do. It's just seeing those changes in people.
A lot of the times when I see clients, I see them further along, and so they've not listened to the whole band of resistance. And then when they continue down that track, eventually what happens is they go into full-on dark night of the soul. And then they
Yeah,
just are like boxed in, and they don't know where their options are, and they feel like they have none. So they're absolutely cornered.
yeah,
But it's
yeah,
amazing to me how it's kind of it's a continuum. And if we can stay open on the path, it doesn't ever have to go all the way down into that corner. We have options before that.
yes, yeah. And then people start to develop physical illnesses and things. I do a lot of work with people with chronic fatigue. I had a client probably about 18 years ago who got through his chronic fatigue. We used NLP, timeline therapy, hypnosis. He then ended up going on and training with TAD too, to become a hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner. He ended up writing a whole program on chronic fatigue. So he has a
Oh my God.
coaching program, he has a book on chronic fatigue. And so I often get some of his clients now. And so I've done a lot of work over the last 18 years with people with chronic fatigue, and releasing the unresolved negative emotions is crucial for their recovery too.
Yes, it sounds like with chronic fatigue, a lot of that is psychosomatic, that it's their thoughts, their feelings that are then manifesting into the physical.
It is, and then there's also often there is some nutritional component. There is definitely some things, some supplements that need to happen, which Dan covers in his program. He actually used to be a neurophysicist, I think it is, and so he went into the most minute details of how chronic fatigue works, and so he really did put together a phenomenal program on anything and everything that people need to be working on to overcome it. So there are quite a lot of factors, of which the emotional component is one. Yeah.
I'm going to have to look for his info because I know I've been having some health challenges myself this year. It's getting a little bit harder. The diet piece is always a consistent challenge. I tend to live really, really well with being sugar-free, with being low carb, but this year things are just different. It's not working the same. And I think part of it is being in Ohio and not getting that vitamin D the way that I need.
Yeah.
But it would be fascinating to have him have that perspective and to be able to hear that. And that really is beautiful work on your part. And you know it because after he resolved it, he immediately left a really, I'm imagining, big career that he worked very hard for. He was probably very niche in his field, doing really well, and he chose to leave it and become a timeline therapist. That really speaks volumes on the work, and that's what I love about this, because you can hear, and that's not an uncommon story. We hear that a lot. So, I
Yeah.
left a big career because I wasn't satisfied and I wanted more, and I went to do hypnotherapy or timeline therapy or NLP, and it changed my life, and that's what I wanted to do next. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, not all of us know at 7 years old. Had you asked me, I had very different answers, but I also didn't know the word hypnotist or a coach back then. So I wonder,
No,
how
no.
is it? Yeah, how is it you'd had that exposure or knew the word to know, or did you know the word, or did you just describe it and the people around you understood?
Apparently, I knew the word because apparently I'd said to her, I'm going to be a hypnotherapist. And
Yeah.
she never forgot that, you know. And as I said, I don't even know where I got that from in the UK in the 60s.
Yeah.
Certainly, certainly wasn't any of it around me that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, funny
I'm
that I
guessing it
took
wasn't
on.
really.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I get lag sometimes, so sometimes I miss.
And, I obviously didn't listen to that originally, and I followed in my family's footsteps. My mother had been a nurse, my sister was a nurse, and so that was kind of the thing I thought I should do. So I went into nursing, and although I enjoyed it, it was never really my thing. It was not really my passion. And so it's interesting that was when I developed the latex allergy, which meant, literally from one day to another, I couldn't be in that situation.
Time's up.
Yep, yep. It's like, if you're
It's
not going to
literally
listen, we're going to give
universes.
you the bigger boot.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Spiritual 2x4. That is my favorite term for that. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
There's so many things we could explore and talk about, and I can't believe we're already coming up to an hour. I know you have a busy day because you see people online and virtual, and you're writing this brand new book. I can't wait to see where that goes.
Yep.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience today if someone is coming through anxiety or looking to heal beyond trauma? A little golden nugget from your practice.
I think really making sure you take time for yourself. Just that. Some people say they don't even have 15 minutes a day to spend on themselves, but it's important to at least spend that time by yourself, on yourself, doing something, like meditation, or even if it's simply reading a book, just something to relax, something to chill, whether it's breathing, whatever it is, but something that takes you out of the humdrum, the running around of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Disrupts those patterns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful advice. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being a guest. I'm going to share your web address in the show notes. So if you think you'd like to talk to Carolyn, resolve some anxiety, move through some trauma, or explore timeline therapy, you'll be able to find that and to reach out to Carolyn. And if you have any questions, let us know. And Carolyn, thank you so much for coming on and being a guest. It's been a pleasure to spend this time with you, and I'm glad we were able to get you past the trauma transcendence of being on this podcast. And
It was a
I
lot
look
of
forward to
fun.
seeing
Thank
you in
you.
2025 too, over at the Michigan
Yes.
Hypnosis Conference. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And hopefully Dan won't be trying to kill me this time.
I'll remind him. I'm on the planning board. I'll remind him. I will make sure that it goes on the notes. No balloons.
I think he's learned that one though.
I'm pretty sure he told me that story before, and I think I just forgot. But
Yeah.
I can just imagine for both of you how challenging that must have been in that moment of, oh, surprise on both ends. Oh.
Oh, well, thank you so much
All
for
right,
having me on
soulful
today. I've
seekers.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've enjoyed having you too, and maybe sometime you'll come back again and deepen into something else for us to explore. I'd love to hear about how your book goes and how it's flowing. Maybe when it's printed and ready, you'll come on and tell us about it, and we can have a bigger chat about authenticity.
Love to.
Yeah. Okay. All right, soulful seekers. This has been another episode of Trauma and Transcendence. Stay healthy, stay blessed, stay happy, but most of all, stay inspired. Bye for now. Thank you for joining us on this transformative episode of Trauma and Transcendence. Your stories matter. I would love to hear them and from you. Connect on our website, healingbeyondtrauma.com, or drop me an email at amanda@healingbeyondtrauma.com. Remember, healing is a journey we take together. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired. This is Amanda, wishing you bright blessings.